Hundreds of active-duty U.S. troops have arrived at the southern border in preparation for an expected increase in migrant intake. Title 42, a Trump-era policy that allowed migrants to be expelled for public health reasons, expires at midnight tonight. Now, former President Trump, whose administration initially enacted Title 42, answered a question on the policy during last night's CNN town hall. Let's watch that.
Title 42 is expected to expire tomorrow. Our southern border and now our northern border are experiencing record migration. We learned on May 2nd that the Biden administration plans on deploying 1,500 troops to the southern border. Do you agree with deploying troops to the border, and how will a Trump administration slow down the rate of migrants coming across all our borders?
Sure. A very fair question, especially since tomorrow is going to be a day of infamy. You're going to have tens of thousands of people pouring into our country. Even the judge, the judge overruled them when they wanted to terminate it early. And he said, that you better extend this thing. The judge in Texas said, I hope you're going to extend this, but this is my policy that they're letting terminate because they lost in court. They wanted to go earlier. You're going to have millions of people pouring into our country right now at a level that nobody's ever seen before. These people are sick. Anybody that wants this to happen to our country, they're destroying our country, and this should not be allowed to happen.
Joining us now to discuss the political fallout from the end of Title 42 is the Hill's Rafael Bernal. Welcome back to Rising, Rafael.
Happy to be here.
All right, so the fundamental question that came up last night at the town hall was this. Title 42 is a COVID-era protection. Many conservatives and people across the board have been eager for the end of those COVID-era protections because they feel like there are various limitations on personal freedoms, et cetera. Now, Title 42 seems to be the exception because in that particular policy, the concern about COVID crossing the border has been used to support people's interest in preventing immigration. Is there a fundamental inconsistency here between wanting to get rid of COVID-era policies when it comes to mandates or masking, but wanting to keep them in effect when it comes to one that happens to also have the effect of diminishing border crossings?
Well, that inconsistency would exist if Title 42 were in fact a pandemic policy. We all know the White House emails have come out between the White House and the CDC. It was a policy that used the pandemic as an excuse to gut asylum. And as a policy, it hasn't been very good at doing what it's supposed to do. It has made processing easier for U.S. officials on the ground, so quicker, but it's caused recidivism. Mexican nationals can cross over and over and over again, and since they get expelled without paperwork, there's no consequences. They just keep trying. So it's caused that problem, and then it's become a political liability for pretty much everyone involved because it's been lionized as a policy that changed, that sort of a game changer on the border, and really it's. Outside of making the paperwork somewhat easier for Border Patrol and Customs and Border Protection officials, it's really not that big a change, just policy-wise.
Well, we are expecting to see a lot of migrants are amassing. There's video footage of them, some waiting for the expiration, which is coming, as we said, tonight. Talk to us a little bit about the preparations being made on the U.S. side of this. Obviously, the troops being sent. Is it expected to be enough? What's it going to be looking like tomorrow?
Well, there's two sides to the story. The administration says they've been preparing for a year and a half for this. They say they feel prepared. It is going to be a crisis no matter what. Again, because the policy was lionized and it became a source of disinformation and misinformation. And there are some people in migrant groups that believe that it will be a policy change that will make it easier for them to enter the United States. Nobody thinks it's an open border, but there is that rumor is circulating among migrants, and that will most likely cause a very significant upsurge in encounters. Now, so the administration says they've been preparing for a year and a half. Those active duty troops that were sent were sent sort of to help with clerical duties, transportation, logistics, whatnot, not interacting directly with the migrants. That's probably not the case for the Texas Police and National Guard that's been sent by Governor Abbott. But most people, most politicians agree, left and right, that the Biden administration hasn't really prepared enough. Like, they had 2 years to prepare for this. But part of the issue for them is, first they defended Title 42, then they let it, they let it be knocked down in court. They stopped defending Title 42, but they just haven't been able to create their own border policy. That's what the Trump administration was very successful at, was creating its own policies. They may have been illegal. There's a reason Title 42 was in the courts. They may have, many people have accused them of being immoral. They may have been a lot of things, but the Trump administration was very proactive about setting the policies that it thought was the best way to manage the border. The Biden administration has not done that.
Yeah, it's really interesting. We heard in the question and answer that we listened to at the top, as part of the question, the woman referenced the thousands of troops that Biden is sending to the border. Donald Trump seemed to shake his head through that, suggesting he either disapproves of those troops being sent, he thinks that more troops should be sent, thinks that fewer should be sent. But he didn't actually opine on that. It seemed like maybe just a knee-jerk rejection of whatever Biden was going to do. And frankly, that's how it's beginning to seem. There is a very easy way that one can present themselves as oppositional to whatever plan is currently articulated, without actually articulating a real vision for what one's own immigration policy is. During the debate, Trump was also challenged on having not completed his border wall, which was a central hallmark of his 2016 campaign. He said that he did build a wall. Caitlin Collins responded that he only had built a few dozen feet of the wall. He simply restated that he had built a wall. And it was this he said, she said situation that recurred again on some other points with respect to immigration. We've seen some criticism of both Biden's immigration policy and Trump's immigration policy. Biden's immigration policy because of the way it mirrors Trump's immigration policy, and yet Trump and Republicans still don't seem satisfied. Julian Castro recently tweeted out, I think it was just yesterday, that Biden is the first president in the history of the United States of America that says anyone seeking asylum has to do it in another country. There's been this collapse of what it means to make an asylum claim versus people who don't have a legal basis for a claim here in the United States of America. How is the average voter supposed to tease out what, from a policy perspective, are the actual options on the table for them in the electoral season without just having a knee-jerk impulse to say, well, Biden's a good guy and Trump's a bad guy, or vice versa on this issue, and voting on that basis?
I wish I had an answer for that, frankly, but the precept of your question is absolutely correct. Immigration and border security have become so politicized that we just don't know what is possible policy-wise anymore. We did have this idea of comprehensive immigration reform at some point. That's obviously not on the political table right now. There are some pushes by both Republican and Democrats to negotiate something constructive, even if it's small, that addresses the need for foreign workers, that somewhat addresses the humanitarian nature of migration. The idea that you can stop migration at any point in human history is it's insane, essentially. But yeah, we spent 4 years of the Trump administration essentially fighting the administration on whether it was 450 feet of actual wall or reconstituted fence, or is it fencing, or is it wall system, really going in circles. The Biden administration promised to stop that, and as much as I do believe they wanted to stop the politicization of the issue because it doesn't seem to favor Democrats, but they have been unable to. So how do voters decide who is right on borders and immigration? I mean, given the results that neither Democrats nor Republicans have been able to turn in, I think voters are more likely than not to, we know that most people will vote with the party they already agree with anyway, that it's a very divided country, but I strive to see how any voter would decide based on results, which party is leading better on immigration. They might be able to decide based on sort of the philosophical grounding of I wouldn't even say their proposed policies, but of their platform.
Well, conservatives will say
Right.
conservatives will say that because there's unprecedented, that there's a spike in immigration and a spike that's anticipated to increase because of the end of Title 42 under a Democratic president, that says something. They made the argument early on that Joe Biden, signaling himself as a pro-immigrant candidate, was signaling to folks across Central and South America that it was the open borders, and that's why we're having this spike. Now you can push back against that framing, but that is the argument. In the eyes of many people, they're going to perceive a Republican just being in office as, in and of itself, helpful to that.
I think we got to leave it there. Rafael, thank you so much for joining us.
Pleasure as always.